Before time had a name, before the first dawn broke across the vastness of eternity, there was music, pure, resounding, divine. A celestial harmony woven from light, vibrating through the endless halls of heaven. And among the hosts of angels, one stood above all, brilliant, radiant, magnificent. Lucifer, the morning star. He was not evil, not yet. He was the masterpiece of the Creator, the reflection of glory, the first to rise and the last to fall. But even in heaven, freedom burns like fire. And every fire, untamed, can become a storm. This is not the tale of horned demons or lakes of fire. This is the forbidden story of a first heartbreak in heaven, of a choice that echoed through eternity, of the rebellion that split the stars and darkened the skies. Prepare to enter the realms where angels once whispered secrets of destiny, and fall with the one who dared to question the divine, the one who refused to bow, the one who dreamed of more. For this is not only the story of Lucifer, it is the story of pride, of loss, of light turned shadow, and of the eternal question that even God allowed to be asked. What if there was another way? Chapter 1. The Dawn of Creation. In the beginning, before time had a name, the universe existed as an endless void, silent, empty, and without form. Then, from this infinite stillness, the Creator took his first steps. With a thought, he willed the cosmos into being, igniting the first spark of life. Stars were born, their light scattering across the vast expanse, while oceans swelled and mountains rose. The Creator, in his boundless wisdom and love, breathed life into his creation. Yet, even with such beauty, he was alone. Longing for companionship, he forged beings of light, angels, to serve as guardians of his creation. Among them was Lucifer, the most radiant of all, with wings that shone brighter than stars and a voice that could stir the heavens. Lucifer was the Creator's most beloved, the embodiment of perfection, intelligent, beautiful, and strong. He was entrusted with great responsibilities, leading the heavenly hosts in worship and maintaining balance in the realms. But beneath his celestial grace, a quiet seed of pride began to grow. Why should the Creator hold all the power? Lucifer wondered. Was it not only fitting that he, too, should possess more? As the most perfect of all angels, why should he not share in the Creator's glory? This subtle thought, this seed of pride, began to grow, unseen at first, but soon it became a force that would change the course of creation itself. Lucifer's heart stirred with rebellion. He began to believe he was destined to govern the realms with the same power as the Creator. And thus, the pride that had once whispered softly now burned within him. This pride would lead to his downfall, igniting a rebellion that would shatter heaven and alter the very fabric of existence. The dawn of creation had brought beauty and life, but it also sowed the seeds of conflict. Lucifer, the light-bringer, would become the harbinger of both. Chapter 2. The Seed of Rebellion. Lucifer's brilliance was unmatched, his beauty unrivaled among the angels. His wings shimmered with cosmic light, and his voice could stir the stars. He was the Creator's most beloved, revered by all in heaven. Yet, in the quiet corners of his mind, something strange began to stir. It wasn't a thirst for power or vengeance, but a subtle feeling, an unsettling sense of incompleteness. Lucifer questioned why, despite his greatness, he should not be more. Why should the Creator alone sit on the throne? Was his wisdom not equal to the Creator's? Was he not deserving of that same glory? At first, the thought was fleeting, but it grew stronger. Lucifer, though entrusted with leadership over the heavenly host, began to believe he was meant for more than servitude. His pride was not born of malice, but of belief that he was deserving of greatness. The idea of rebellion was not an angered outburst, but a quiet, insistent ambition. As time passed, the question grew louder, and the seed of rebellion took root in his heart. Lucifer began to see the Creator's reign as a limitation, one that confined him to a role he no longer wished to play. He longed for a throne of his own, a destiny beyond mere worship. The idea of ruling the realms as the creator became a certainty in his mind. The rebellion, once a whisper, now burned within him, and Lucifer knew his destiny was to surpass the creator's plan for him. The seed of rebellion had been planted, and Lucifer's soul would not rest until it consumed him entirely. Chapter 3. The Gathering Storm. As time passed, the rebellion within Lucifer grew stronger. What had begun as a quiet whisper had turned into a relentless roar in his mind. Lucifer's pride and ambition swelled, and he began to question the Creator's reign. No longer satisfied with his role as the morning star, Lucifer sought more. He wanted dominion over the realms, a new order where the angels were not servants but masters. Lucifer didn't want to destroy heaven, but to reshape it, a place where angels were free to wield their power, unbound by the Creator's will. His thoughts turned into plans, and he shared his vision with a select few. At first, his words were whispered in the hidden corners of heaven, but soon others began to listen, angels who were disillusioned with their roles and yearned for something greater. The rebellion began to spread. What started as a small movement grew into an army, united by the dream of a new heaven, one of freedom and power. Lucifer's followers, drawn to his vision, gathered secretly, preparing for a confrontation with the Creator. The storm was approaching. The forces of light and darkness were on the brink of clash, and the first spark of rebellion had been lit. The gathering storm was upon them. It was only a matter of time before the reckoning began. Chapter 4. The Rebellion Unfolds. The long-anticipated moment of rebellion arrived not with a clash of swords, but with an oppressive silence. Lucifer stood before the Creator's throne, flanked by his loyal followers, his heart pounding with ambition. For eons, he had served the Creator, but no longer. He had come to believe that he was destined for more. He sought to rule, not serve. Lucifer boldly questioned the Creator. Why must we always serve? Why must we bow before you? His words echoed through heaven, a challenge to the Creator's authority. But instead of wrath, the Creator responded with sorrow. He warned Lucifer that true greatness lies in humility, not in exaltation. Yet Lucifer, consumed by pride, rejected this wisdom. I will rise. I will rule, he declared. Thus, the rebellion began. Lucifer's followers, angels who shared his vision, took their stand. They unleashed their divine energy, a force of rebellion against the Creator's divine order. The battle that followed was not fought with swords, but with pure will and cosmic energy. Lucifer's light blazed forth, clashing with the Creator's angels, whose light held firm against the rebellion. The conflict was not just physical, but ideological. Lucifer fought for freedom and self-rule, while the Creator's angels upheld the harmony of heaven. As the battle raged, Lucifer felt the thrill of his rebellion, convinced that heaven would bow to his will. Yet the Creator, saddened by Lucifer's fall, knew this was a rebellion not just against authority, but against the very nature of creation itself. The war for heaven had begun, and the heavens would be forever scarred by it. Chapter 5. The Fall of Lucifer. The rebellion raged on, but despite Lucifer's fury and determination, the forces of heaven, led by the archangel Michael, proved too powerful. Lucifer and his followers fought fiercely for a new world where they would rule, not serve. But heaven's celestial warriors, armed with divine light, relentlessly pushed back. Lucifer, once brilliant and powerful, began to feel the weight of his rebellion. His wings, once radiant, were now torn and tattered, and his strength waned under heaven's overwhelming force. The pride that had driven him to challenge the Creator now led him to face his inevitable downfall. His followers, once full of hope, faltered as the battle progressed. In the final moments, Lucifer stood alone, broken and diminished. The archangel Michael, resolute and sorrowful, approached. With a single decisive strike from his sword, imbued with heaven's light, Lucifer's fate was sealed. The force of the blow sent shock waves through the heavens, and for a brief moment there was silence. Lucifer, the morning star, fell from heaven, cast into the eternal darkness. The once proud angel, now a shadow of his former self, plummeted through the void, his cries unheard. The fall marked the end of the rebellion and the beginning of a new, darker chapter. Lucifer, no longer the light bringer, would embody the very darkness he had sought to escape, and the consequences of his actions would echo throughout eternity. Chapter 6. The Birth of Hell. Lucifer's fall from heaven was not the end of his existence, but the beginning of something far darker and more powerful than anything he had ever experienced. As he plummeted through the void, the silence of the abyss enveloped him. Yet, within that vast emptiness, he felt a surge of raw power unlike anything he had known in the realms of heaven. For the first time, he was free, no longer bound by the Creator's laws or the constraints of heaven. Lucifer was unchained. In this newfound freedom, Lucifer began to shape his destiny. The abyss, once a formless void, became a canvas for his will. From the very fabric of chaos, he began to craft a kingdom of his own design. Hell, as it would come to be known, was not merely a place of punishment. It was a kingdom of rebellion. It was a realm forged in fire and brimstone, where suffering and power intertwined, and where Lucifer's defiance against heaven would be immortalized. Here, in this place where no divine order existed, Lucifer could reign unchallenged. Hell became the epitome of everything Lucifer stood for: his rebellion, his pride, his refusal to submit. It was a kingdom where defiance was not only allowed, but celebrated. Those who sought power through rebellion would find a home here, and Lucifer, as the master of this realm, would never again be subjugated. The fire and chaos of hell were no longer signs of torment. They became symbols of Lucifer's newfound rule. In the heart of this tumultuous kingdom, Lucifer stood as the Prince of Darkness, a ruler who had forged his own fate, free from the Creator's reign. Chapter 7. The Fallen Ones. Lucifer's fall was not a solitary one. As he descended into the abyss, he was not alone. A great host of angels, once the brightest and most radiant in heaven, followed him. These angels had chosen rebellion. They had chosen to stand by Lucifer's side in his defiance of the Creator. In doing so, they too became fallen angels, their once pure light extinguished. Their wings, once symbols of divine grace, were now torn and broken. They had forsaken heaven, and in doing so, they had lost their place in the Creator's world. But Lucifer saw something in these fallen angels, a strength that had been forged through their defiance. They were no longer bound by heaven's laws or the chains of servitude that had once defined their existence. In the abyss, they were free, free to forge their own path, free to build a new kingdom where they could rule according to their own will. Lucifer gathered these fallen angels, who were now demons, and together they began to construct a new realm, one of fire, molten rivers, and jagged landscapes, a kingdom of pure rebellion. The world they built was a reflection of their new identity, no longer servants of heaven, but masters of their own fate. In this new kingdom, rebellion was not only tolerated, it was celebrated. The very land was infused with their defiance. Their song was no longer a hymn of servitude to the Creator, but a powerful anthem of defiance to Lucifer, their king. With every note, they proclaimed their loyalty to him, to their newfound freedom. The echoes of their song reverberated through the fiery landscape, a declaration that Lucifer's kingdom was no longer a place of mere torment. It was a realm of power, of freedom, and of rebellion. Lucifer ruled this kingdom not just as a master of suffering, but as a sovereign of those who had chosen to rise up against the Creator. And in the flames of hell, Lucifer and his legions of demons would reign forever. Chapter 8. The Throne of Darkness. Lucifer had fully embraced his role as the Prince of Darkness, and with that acceptance came the monumental task of shaping his new kingdom in hell. No longer was hell simply a place of punishment for the fallen. Under Lucifer's rule, it became a realm of power ambition, and defiance, a kingdom crafted in his image. At the heart of this fiery abyss, amidst the ever-burning flames and endless shadows, Lucifer constructed a throne unlike any other, a throne forged not from gold or precious gems, but from the very essence of darkness itself. This throne was a symbol of Lucifer's rebellion against the Creator, a constant reminder that he had defied heaven and claimed dominion over his own fate. It was cold, unyielding, and radiated a sense of oppressive power. Sitting upon it, Lucifer felt the full weight of his authority. This was not a throne of opulence, but one of defiance, and from this seat, he ruled his kingdom with an iron will. As Lucifer surveyed his kingdom, a vast and chaotic expanse of fire and shadow, he found a strange sense of satisfaction in the rebellion that had defined its creation. Yet, amidst the triumph, a quiet doubt began to creep into his mind. He had sought freedom, but now he questioned whether he had truly found it. Was this chaotic, fiery kingdom the fulfillment of his desires, or had he merely traded one form of servitude for another? As he sat upon the throne, Lucifer pondered whether the power he had claimed could ever fill the void within him. Could ruling hell bring him the peace he had longed for? Or was this emptiness something that would always remain? The weight of his choices hung heavy in the silence of the throne room, and Lucifer, now a ruler in a realm of his own making, was left to contemplate whether the victory he had won was truly enough to silence the longing in his heart. Chapter 9. The Temptation of Mortals. Even as Lucifer reigned supreme in hell, his ambition stretched far beyond its fiery borders. He had forged his kingdom from the depths of rebellion, but he knew that his true power would come from a broader reach. In humanity, Lucifer saw the same pride and longing that had once driven him to defy the Creator. Mortals, with their fragile hearts and insatiable desires, were ripe for the same temptation that had seduced him. Their weaknesses, greed, ambition, and a hunger for power, were the perfect soil in which to plant seeds of rebellion. Lucifer, ever the master of subtlety, began to whisper into the hearts of mortals. His whispers were not loud or forceful, but soft and insidious. He spoke to the powerful and the weak, to kings and beggars alike. He offered them promises of power, freedom, and glory, things they believed were beyond their reach. Through these whispers, Lucifer revealed a hidden truth, a truth he claimed had been concealed by the Creator. He told them they deserved more, that they should no longer bow in submission, but rise to claim their own destiny. With each whispered word, Lucifer sowed seeds of doubt in their hearts, turning their thoughts against the Creator. His influence spread like a shadow over the minds of men, and slowly, mortals began to question the Creator's authority. No longer content in their roles as servants, many began to see Lucifer as a liberator, a guide to a greater destiny, a destiny of power and autonomy. As his whispers took root, Lucifer began to gather a new army, not of angels or demons, but of mortals who had embraced the dark path he laid before them. These followers unknowingly were working to bring about a new world, a world where Lucifer would reign as king, not from the throne of hell, but from the hearts and minds of those who had turned away from the Creator. And with each mortal that fell under his sway, Lucifer's kingdom expanded, inching closer to the reality of a world that would bend to his will. Chapter 10. The War Between Heaven and Hell. The war between heaven and hell had only just begun, and it would soon unfold into a cosmic conflict unlike any the universe had ever seen. Lucifer's fall had not marked the end of his rebellion. Far from it, it had only been the beginning of a war that would span the heavens and the earth. Lucifer had built his kingdom in hell, but his true purpose, the ultimate challenge he sought, was to overthrow the Creator's dominion over all creation and to replace the existing order with one of his own making. Lucifer's army, now a blend of fallen angels, demons, and mortals who had embraced his dark vision, began to grow in strength and influence. As they rallied under his banner, the forces of heaven, led by the archangel Michael and his legions of light, watched with growing concern. They understood that this was no mere revolt for power. This was a battle for the very soul of the universe itself. Lucifer's rebellion threatened the very fabric of creation, and the Creator's kingdom was at risk. Michael, steadfast and loyal to the Creator, prepared for the inevitable confrontation. He gathered the hosts of heaven, strengthening their resolve and arming them with the divine purpose to protect the Creator's will. But they knew the war would not remain confined to the celestial realms. It would spill over into the mortal world, into the hearts and minds of humankind. Lucifer's influence had already begun to twist the souls of men, and now the war for the universe will be fought not just in heaven and hell, but on earth as well. The forces of heaven and hell would soon clash in a final battle, a confrontation that would decide not only the fate of the two realms, but the future of creation itself. Would the Creators will remain supreme, or would Lucifer's rebellion bring forth a new order, a new world where defiance reigned? The universe itself trembled, knowing that this war would shape its destiny for eternity. Chapter 11. The Legacy of Lucifer. While the war between heaven and hell raged on, one thing was undeniable. Lucifer's legacy was already taking shape. His rebellion had ignited a fire that could never be extinguished. No matter the outcome of the cosmic battle, Lucifer had become something far more than just a fallen angel. He had become a symbol. Lucifer embodied defiance, freedom, and pride. He had stood against the Creator, choosing to forge his own path, and in doing so, he had become an enduring figure of resistance. His name would echo through history, spoken in both fear and reverence. To mortals, he was the ultimate representation of the fallen hero, an archetype of ambition, the tragic figure who had sought greatness and paid the price for his pride. His story would live on in the hearts of humanity, a tale of rebellion that would never be forgotten. Lucifer, the Prince of Darkness, was no longer just a rebellious angel. He had become a symbol of light through the darkness of defiance, a figure whose impact would stretch beyond the borders of heaven and hell. His influence, whether feared or admired, would shape the course of human history. As the war between heaven and hell continued to unfold, Lucifer's reach only expanded. He had left an indelible mark on the fabric of creation, a reminder that even in the depths of darkness, there existed power, ambition, and the unyielding desire for freedom. Though the final outcome of the war remained uncertain, one truth was clear. Lucifer's rebellion was not a single act, but a legacy that would live on. It had only just begun, and its effects would reverberate through eternity. Chapter 12. The Seeds of Rebellion on Earth. As Lucifer's grip over hell solidified, he found himself no longer satisfied with ruling a realm of shadows and fire. His ambitions, once focused solely on defying heaven, had now expanded beyond the boundaries of his dark kingdom. Lucifer's eyes, once burning with the fire of defiance, now glowed with a cold, calculating ambition. He had won his spiritual victory against heaven, but the war was far from over. The Creator's dominion still stretched across the universe, and Lucifer had plans to challenge it in a way that would alter the course of creation forever. His next conquest was no longer celestial, but earthly. Lucifer recognized the potential in humans from the very beginning. Mortals were fragile, bound by flesh, yet filled with a burning desire for power, freedom, and control, desires that mirrored the pride and ambition that had once led him to defy the Creator. Their yearning for more, their dreams of greatness, made them ripe for corruption. He saw in them the same potential for rebellion that had once fueled his own fall from grace. And so, from the depths of hell, Lucifer began to whisper. His whispers were not the fiery roars of wrathful vengeance, but quiet promises, promises of power, forbidden knowledge, and ultimate freedom. He reached out to those who were disillusioned, who felt trapped in their lives, who were yearning for something beyond the mundane. It was not the kings or rulers he targeted first, but the outcasts, the dreamers, and the sinners, those who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. He found those whose hearts burned with dissatisfaction, whose souls longed for more than the Creator's intended purpose for them. Through these individuals, Lucifer planted the seeds of rebellion, nurturing their desires with subtlety and care. He whispered in their ears, showing them the path to greatness, a path that led away from the Creator and toward the allure of darkness. It was a path where they could rise above their limitations, where they could seize power and carve their own destinies. For the first time in eons, Lucifer felt the thrill of influence once again. This time, not in the heavens, but over the very hearts and minds of humanity. Chapter 13. The Temptation of the Greatest Heroes. Lucifer's whispers did not stop with the disillusioned or the outcasts. As his influence grew, so did his ambitions. He sought more, much more. His vision extended beyond the vulnerable and the marginalized. He set his sights on the strongest and most capable among humanity, those whose hearts burned with the potential for greatness. These were the heroes of Earth, men and women who had risen to prominence, who possessed strength, intelligence, and courage. These were the leaders, the warriors, the philosophers, and the visionaries who could shape the fate of nations. These were the ones who could bring about monumental change and alter the very course of history. If Lucifer could sway these individuals, he knew his rebellion would gain an unstoppable force. He began to appear to them in their dreams, a figure of light and wisdom, offering them promises of boundless knowledge, power, and truth. He painted a vision of grandeur, one where they could become not just rulers of earth, but masters of both heaven and earth. He offered them the secrets of the universe, knowledge that had been hidden from them by the Creator. He offered them a chance to transcend their mortal limitations and claim their rightful place as gods. Lucifer's whispers were seductive. He spoke to kings and queens, generals and conquerors, scholars and revolutionaries. He appealed to their deepest desires, pride, ambition, and the longing for greatness. His words were carefully crafted to stir their hearts and challenge their beliefs. He made them question everything they had known, their loyalty to the Creator, their place in the grand design, and the very foundation of their faith. In every promise, in every whisper, Lucifer sowed the seeds of his rebellion. He made them believe that they were meant for more than servitude, that they were entitled to rule, that the Creator had deceived them by keeping the true power from them. He encouraged them to rise above the limitations of their fate and seize control of their destiny. In doing so, he turned their hearts against the Creator and pulled them into his web of temptation. Through these greatest heroes, Lucifer's influence grew even stronger. He had begun to build an army not only of the weak and disillusioned, but of those who had the power to lead and shape the world. And in the hearts of these men and women, the seeds of rebellion took root, promising a future where Lucifer's vision could become reality. Chapter 14. The Mortal Champions. One by one, Lucifer's whispers took root in the hearts of Earth's greatest champions. His promises of power, freedom, and glory echoed in their minds until they could no longer ignore them. Kings who had once ruled with wisdom and justice now found themselves consumed by an insatiable thirst for control. Generals who had once fought to preserve peace and protect the innocent were now driven by the desire to conquer and dominate. Even the heroes who had once stood as beacons of light found themselves inexplicably drawn to the seductive allure of dark glory. Their once noble aspirations were corrupted, their hearts turned against the very ideals they had once upheld. Lucifer watched from his throne in the abyss, his eyes glowing with satisfaction as his new army took shape. They were not angels, beings of divine light, but mortal men and women, their spirits now consumed by pride, ambition, and an insatiable thirst for power. They were imperfect, fragile, but it was precisely their vulnerability and longing that made them so malleable to his influence. Together, they would rise up and challenge the Creator's order, defying the very foundation of existence itself. Together, they would bring about a new world where Lucifer's vision would reign supreme. And so, Lucifer began to prepare for the inevitable war. His demons, once fallen angels now bound to his cause, rallied in the depths of hell. His mortal champions, now bound by their ambition and dark desires, trained tirelessly, honing their skills in preparation for the battle ahead. The rebellion was no longer a battle between celestial beings. It was now a conflict that would decide the fate of the souls of humanity. Lucifer's forces were growing stronger, united under a banner of defiance and rebellion. The time for war was drawing near. Chapter 15. The First Confrontation. The war between heaven and hell had transcended the boundaries of the celestial realms. Lucifer's influence, once confined to the dark recesses of the abyss, had spilled over into the mortal world. His whispers had corrupted even the strongest hearts, and his rebellion had sparked a conflict that would soon consume all of existence. The first confrontation between Lucifer's forces and the Creator's army was now inevitable. The Creator, ever watchful and vigilant, had seen the storm gathering on the horizon. He knew that Lucifer's rebellion was not merely an act of defiance against heaven. It was a challenge to the very fabric of creation. Lucifer's ambition was boundless, and he would not stop until every soul in the universe was lost to his darkness. The Creator understood that if he did not act, Lucifer's influence would spread further, tearing apart the delicate balance of the cosmos. In response, the Creator began to prepare his own army, gathering the angels who remained loyal to him. Among them was Michael, the greatest of the archangels, the warrior who had once led heaven's forces against Lucifer during the First War. Now, Michael would once again take up arms to defend the Creator's will, not just for heaven, but for the entire universe. The first battle would take place not in the celestial realms, but in the mortal world, a world now caught in the crossfire of the celestial war. The armies of both Lucifer and the Creator would meet on this battleground, where the fate of humanity and the future of all worlds would be decided. It would be a battle of ideals, pride against humility, rebellion against submission. As the two armies prepared for battle, the sky above darkened, as though even the heavens themselves could feel the weight of the conflict. Lucifer's demons, their eyes burning with fury, and his mortal champions, filled with ambition and desire, stood at the ready. On the opposing side, the angels of heaven, led by Michael, stood firm, their wings shining with an ethereal brilliance that illuminated the darkness like stars in the night sky. The battle began with an intensity that shook the very earth beneath their feet. Lucifer's forces, though powerful and driven by their dark ambitions, were not enough to overcome the might of heaven. The angels fought with relentless determination, their light cutting through the shadows like a beacon of hope. Their strength was not just in their power, but in their unwavering faith in the Creator's plan. Despite the fury of the battle, Lucifer's forces began to falter. His mortal champions, though brave and determined, were no match for the celestial might of the Creator's angels. For every demon that fell, another would rise, but the angels of heaven, guided by their eternal purpose, were unyielding. Lucifer, himself a force to be reckoned with, could not withstand the combined might of heaven's army. In the end, he was forced to retreat into the shadows of his kingdom, his army scattered and broken. The first confrontation had ended in a defeat for the Prince of Darkness, but Lucifer's resolve remained unshaken. The war was far from over. Chapter 16. The Eternal Struggle. Although Lucifer had suffered a significant defeat in the first great battle, his rebellion was far from over. Far from succumbing to despair, the defeat ignited a deeper fire within him. His desire for vengeance became all-consuming. In the dark recesses of hell, he swore to rise again, stronger and more determined than ever before. His ambition had not been diminished. It had only grown. Lucifer understood that this war was not merely about gaining dominion over heaven or earth. It was a conflict that transcended realms. It was a war for the very soul of existence itself. The struggle was a timeless one, destined to echo through the ages, a struggle between light and darkness, pride and humility, freedom and submission. The forces of heaven sought to uphold order, submission, and divine will, while Lucifer's rebellion embodied the pursuit of freedom, self-determination, and defiance. This battle was eternal, an unending cycle of rise and fall, victory and defeat. Neither side would ever fully conquer the other. Lucifer's defiance was not just against the Creator. It was against the very nature of creation itself, a challenge to the immutable laws that govern the universe. For Lucifer, this war was about more than just power. It was a declaration of his will to reshape existence. And so, the eternal struggle continued, its flames fanned by Lucifer's relentless ambition and the Creator's unwavering resolve to maintain order. The war would rage on, with no end in sight, as long as there was pride to challenge humility and freedom to oppose submission. Chapter 17. The Gathering of the Fallen. In the wake of the first great battle, Lucifer retreated into the deepest and darkest corners of hell. His forces had been decisively defeated, scattered across the wasteland of the abyss. But Lucifer was not broken. He had learned valuable lessons from his clash with the Creator's army, and now, in the quiet desolation of his domain, he began to reflect and strategize. Lucifer recognized that his mortal champions, though valiant, had not been enough to secure victory. Their strength, though great, was ultimately no match for the divine power of the Creator's angels. The rebellion needed more than mortal warriors. It needed something far stronger, something more ancient and potent. It needed the power that could only come from the depths of hell itself. And so, Lucifer began to call upon the lost souls who languished in the shadows of hell. Those who had once been angels, powerful and pure, but had been cast down for their pride or their failure. These souls, though broken and tortured by their guilt and regret, still carried the remnants of their former glory. In their hearts, there remained a flicker of the divine fire that had once made them magnificent. Lucifer reached out to these souls, offering them a chance for redemption, not through submission to the Creator, but through loyalty to Him. He promised them a purpose beyond their suffering, a chance to reclaim their lost glory and power. He offered them freedom from their torment, not by returning to heaven, but by serving Him in the darkness of hell. In His kingdom, they would no longer be defined by their past mistakes. They would be reborn, reshaped into something greater, something more powerful. These fallen souls, eager for a new purpose, began to rally to Lucifer's cause. They became his most trusted followers, his generals, his lieutenants, and his elite warriors. They were no longer angels, but something darker, something more formidable. They were the Nephilim, the giants of darkness, the champions of Lucifer's army. The Nephilim were different from the demons who had already sworn allegiance to Lucifer. They were ancient, powerful, and wise, their knowledge of the heavenly realms making them invaluable assets in Lucifer's war. They were the very embodiment of fallen grace, their power amplified by the torment and suffering they had endured. Together with Lucifer, they would lead the charge against the Creator's forces, their every move calculated and precise. As Lucifer stood among them, he knew that with the Nephilim at his side, his army had grown stronger. This was no longer just a rebellion of demons and mortals. It was a rebellion led by the fallen themselves, those who had once known the light and had chosen the darkness. They were the vanguard of his war, and their power would be the key to his ultimate victory. Chapter 18. The Rise of the Nephilim. With the Nephilim now at his side, Lucifer's army grew exponentially in both strength and presence. These mighty beings were not mere demons. They were the embodiment of pure power, strength, and unyielding pride. Once they had been the most exalted of heaven's angels, revered and powerful. Now, however, they were the champions of Lucifer's rebellion, towering figures who radiated both terror and awe, striking fear into the hearts of both mortals and angels alike. The Nephilim were more than just warriors. They were symbols of fallen grace, their presence an eternal testament to the consequences of defying the Creator. With their immense size and formidable power, they became the generals of Lucifer's army, leading his legions with unmatched strength and strategic brilliance. Their once divine beauty had been twisted into something dark and terrifying, but their power was undeniable. Together with Lucifer, the Nephilim began to reshape hell into a realm of unimaginable strength and dominance. The once chaotic and fiery abyss was transformed into a vast kingdom, a dark fortress where rebellion was not only allowed but celebrated. The air was thick with the energy of defiance, and the very ground trembled under the power of the Nephilim as they carved out their dominion. Yet, as Lucifer's army grew, so did the forces of heaven. The battle for the hearts and souls of mortals raged on, and although heaven had suffered its first major defeat, it was far from broken. The Creator's angels, led by Michael, regrouped, and their ranks swelled with the might of heaven's determination. They fortified their positions, prepared for the inevitable final clash. Lucifer knew that the war was far from over, and the forces of heaven would stop at nothing to protect the balance of existence. Lucifer, aware of the Creator's relentless power, knew that brute strength alone would not be enough to defeat heaven. He needed something more, a secret weapon, an edge that would tip the scales in his favor. The Nephilim's power was formidable, but it was not invincible. He needed knowledge, and not just any knowledge. He needed the kind of knowledge that could rewrite the very rules of creation itself. Chapter 19. The Forbidden Knowledge. Driven by his insatiable thirst for power, Lucifer began to delve deeper into the forbidden realms of the universe. He knew that the Creator had concealed many ancient secrets, secrets that pertain to the very essence of creation, to life and death, and to the fundamental laws that govern the cosmos. If Lucifer could uncover these secrets, he would gain the power to reshape reality itself, to bend the will of the Creator to his own desires, and finally achieve the victory he had long sought. Lucifer's pursuit of knowledge took him to the deepest and most hidden corners of hell. There, he scoured ancient tomes, long-forgotten scrolls, and relics that predated even the dawn of creation. These were no ordinary books of dark magic or occult rituals. They were the remnants of an age long past, an age before time itself had begun. These texts contained the lost knowledge of the universe, the wisdom of the ancients, and the hidden truths that the Creator had long since sealed away. The forbidden knowledge was said to hold unimaginable power. It was said that whoever controlled it could create and destroy entire worlds, shape the future as they saw fit, and even transcend the limitations of both mortal and immortal realms. For Lucifer, this knowledge was the key to unlocking the Creator's secrets, to unseating divine authority, and to achieving the ultimate dominance over existence itself. Lucifer's desire for this forbidden knowledge grew with each passing moment. His thirst for power was all-consuming, driving him to send his most trusted demons, including the Nephilim, to scour every dark realm and retrieve the hidden texts. For centuries, they searched tirelessly, facing countless dangers and obstacles, but their efforts were not in vain. Finally, after eons of searching, they found it, the Book of Eternity. The Book of Eternity was an ancient tome, older than time itself, containing the very secrets Lucifer sought. It was bound in blackened leather, its pages filled with cryptic symbols and forbidden truths. The book held the power to unravel the mysteries of the universe, to manipulate time and space, and to alter the fabric of existence. With this power in his grasp, Lucifer could challenge the Creator in ways never before imagined. As Lucifer held the Book of Eternity in his hands, a sense of triumph surged through him. With this knowledge, he could finally reshape reality to his will. He could overthrow the Creator's reign, defy the very nature of existence, and bring about a new order, one where Lucifer, and not the Creator, would be the supreme ruler. The power to reshape the universe was now within his reach, and nothing could stop him from achieving his ultimate victory. Chapter 20. The War Escalates. With the Book of Eternity now in his possession, Lucifer's power surged to unimaginable heights. The very fabric of reality seemed to bend to his will as he unlocked the deepest secrets of the universe. His army, already vast and powerful, became even more formidable. His demons grew fiercer, their dark powers amplified by the forbidden knowledge Lucifer had acquired. The Nephilim, now strengthened by the book's secrets, stood as towering figures of terror, ready to lead the charge against heaven. Lucifer's influence over mortals deepened with each passing day. The whispers he had sown in the hearts of humanity grew louder and more compelling, drawing countless souls to his side. The temptation he offered, power, freedom, and the promise of a new order, was irresistible to many. Kings, scholars, soldiers, and even ordinary men and women found themselves swayed by Lucifer's words, drawn into his rebellion. The lines between good and evil, right and wrong, began to blur. What was once a clear distinction between light and darkness now seemed less certain, as mortals struggled to comprehend the true nature of the battle raging above them. The forces of heaven, led by the archangel Michael, watched in growing concern. Michael had always known that Lucifer was dangerous, but now, with the fallen angel's newfound power, he faced an enemy unlike any he had ever encountered. Lucifer had become a force of nature, a raging storm of darkness that threatened to engulf everything in its path. His rebellion had transcended mere pride. It had become a war for the very soul of the universe itself. As Lucifer's power continued to grow, the Creator's angels fortified their defenses, preparing for the ultimate confrontation. They knew that the fate of all creation hung in the balance, and the coming battle would be the final, catastrophic clash between heaven and hell. Every soul, every world, and every dimension would be affected by the outcome. The Creator, watching from his divine vantage point, knew that the time for a reckoning had arrived. The question lingered in the hearts of both sides. Who would emerge victorious in this cosmic battle for the soul of existence? Would Lucifer, the once beautiful morning star, succeed in his rebellion and bring about a new order, or would the Creator's light shine through, restoring balance and order to the cosmos once more? Chapter 21. The Great Battle. The time for battle had finally come. Lucifer, now armed with the Book of Eternity and an army forged from demons, Nephilim, and mortal champions, prepared for the final showdown with heaven. His forces, swelling with strength and dark power, stood poised to challenge the Creator's authority once and for all. It was a battle that would decide the fate of the universe, a battle that would determine whether rebellion or order would rule the cosmos. On the other side, the forces of heaven, led by Michael and the archangels, gathered in solemn unity. Their wings shone with the brilliance of the stars, their swords glowing with divine fire, ready to defend the Creator's will and safeguard the delicate balance of all creation. Heaven's warriors had trained for this moment, knowing that the outcome of this battle would echo across eternity. The Creator's angels, though exhausted by their previous confrontations, stood resolute. They were not merely fighting for heaven. They were fighting for the preservation of existence itself. The two armies met on the field of battle, a cosmic expanse that stretched across the heavens and the earth, a place where time and space seemed to fracture and bend. The battlefield was a realm beyond mortal comprehension, where the clash of light and darkness reverberated across the very fabric of creation. The air crackled with energy as Lucifer's forces, led by the Nephilim, surged forward with unrelenting fury. Lucifer himself fought with the rage of one who had lost everything and was determined to claim it all back. His anger and pride fueled his every strike. Michael, as the greatest of the archangels, fought with the unwavering determination of one who understood the stakes. He led the charge with the fiery resolve of a warrior defending not just a kingdom, but the very soul of creation. His blade blazed with divine light, cutting through the darkness of Lucifer's army. His resolve was as unyielding as the Creator's will. Nothing could break it. The battle seemed endless. The forces clashed with such intensity that entire galaxies trembled under the weight of their struggle. Each strike, each blow, was a battle for the very existence of all things. Lucifer's demons fought with unholy vigor, their strength and fury matched only by the angels' purity and light. The Nephilim, towering and powerful, engaged in a brutal contest with heaven's mightiest archangels, shaking the heavens with each clash. But as the battle raged on, the Creator's forces, though bruised and battered, began to regain the upper hand. Lucifer's forces, though powerful, were being worn down. The Creator's angels were relentless in their defense, their light piercing through the darkness like a beacon of hope. For every demon that fell, another took its place, but the angels pressed on with unyielding conviction. At the end of the battle, Lucifer's forces were repelled once again, forced to retreat into the shadows. His mortal champions, though brave, were no match for the might of heaven. Lucifer himself, though unbroken in spirit, was forced to withdraw. The battlefield was littered with the fallen, the echoes of war still reverberating in the cosmos. The Creator's victory was complete, but both sides knew that the war was far from over. Lucifer's pride and ambition could not be extinguished so easily. The rebellion would continue, and the struggle for the soul of the universe would rage on. Chapter 22. The Eternal War. The war between heaven and hell had grown into an eternal conflict, a struggle that transcended time itself. Lucifer, though defeated in countless battles, never faltered in his resolve. His pride, though wounded, remained unbroken. Each defeat only fueled his desire for vengeance, and each time he was cast down, he rose again, more determined than ever to challenge the Creator's authority. This was no ordinary war. It was the war that defined existence itself, the perpetual struggle between light and darkness, between order and chaos. The very essence of creation was tied to this conflict, and as long as time continued, so too would the battle. Lucifer remained the prince of darkness, his influence ever present, never fully extinguished. Though his armies were beaten time and time again, the seeds of rebellion were never fully eradicated. His followers, whether demons or mortals, always found a way to rise again, drawn to his promises of power and freedom from the Creator's design. The Creator's forces, though triumphant in battle, knew that Lucifer's ambition could never truly be quelled. The threat of rebellion would always linger in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike once more. The war was not merely a series of battles. It was an ongoing force, an eternal struggle that pulsed through the universe. It lived in every soul, in every choice made, in every act of defiance or submission. It was a struggle that defined the very nature of existence. As long as beings possessed free will, the war would continue, an endless cycle of light and darkness, creation and destruction. This was the eternal war, a war that would never cease, for it was woven into the fabric of the universe itself. It would rage on, evermore, shaping the fate of all things. Chapter 23. The Unseen Realm. The war for the soul of the universe had raged for eons, with Lucifer and the Creator locked in an unending conflict. Yet, Lucifer knew that in order to finally claim victory, he could not rely on strength alone. The forces of heaven were powerful, their angels steadfast, but Lucifer believed that the true key to victory lay in realms far beyond the reach of heaven and earth. These were not mere distant lands or forgotten corners of the cosmos. They were planes of existence that defied the very rules that governed the universe. Time and space in these realms flowed differently, and the power they held was beyond mortal comprehension. As the battle between heaven and hell escalated, Lucifer turned his focus to these hidden domains. Deep within the infernal depths of hell, where even his fallen light could not reach, Lucifer found a gateway, an ancient portal that had been long forgotten. It was hidden from the eyes of the Creator's forces, overlooked by those who believed the war between light and darkness was the only conflict that mattered. But Lucifer, ever the seeker of forbidden knowledge, had always suspected that there were powers greater than those bound by the laws of heaven and earth, powers that predated the Creator's design. With the Book of Eternity in his grasp, Lucifer knew that the key to unlocking these realms lay within his reach. He gathered his most trusted followers, the Nephilim and his most powerful demonic generals, and sent them on a perilous journey into the unknown. Their task was clear: to retrieve the forbidden knowledge that had been locked away since time immemorial. This was knowledge of the primordials, beings older than even the Creator, forces of raw, untamed power that existed outside the cosmic order. What they discovered in the deepest, darkest voids of existence was far more than Lucifer had anticipated. In the shadows, where no light could penetrate, they encountered ancient entities, beings of unimaginable power that predated the Creator's creation. These beings were not gods, angels, or demons. They were something far older, something beyond comprehension. They were chaos itself, creation and destruction woven into a single primal force. They existed without names, without faces, but their influence was undeniable. Lucifer, with his boundless ambition and insatiable thirst for power, sought to bind these primordial forces to his will. He believed that with their power at his command, he could reshape the universe, bend the Creator's designs to his own desires. But Lucifer soon learned that the primordials could not be tamed. Their power was too great, too wild, and their will too unpredictable. The forces he had awakened could not be controlled. They only manipulated him. In seeking to harness their might, Lucifer had unknowingly unleashed something far beyond his control. The primordials did not submit to his will. Instead, they warped his intentions, twisting them into something far more dangerous than he could have ever anticipated. What had started as an ambitious attempt to change the course of the war had now become a far greater threat to Lucifer than he had ever imagined. The primordials were not allies. They were forces of destruction, and they would not be bound by any ruler. Lucifer had awakened something that could not be undone. What he had sought to control had now begun to control him, and the consequences of this mistake would echo throughout the realms for eons to come. Chapter 24. The Fall of the Mortal Soul. As Lucifer prepared for the ultimate war, he began to understand that the true key to his victory lay not just in the celestial realms, but in the hearts and souls of humanity. Mortals, though fragile and finite in comparison to angels, held within them the potential to tip the balance of the cosmic struggle in his favor. It was not just their physical existence that interested Lucifer. It was their deepest desires, their weaknesses, and their inherent ability to defy their Creator. These were the weapons Lucifer aimed to wield, for through them, he could corrupt and manipulate the very essence of human will. Lucifer had already whispered into the hearts of the most desperate and ambitious individuals, slowly sowing seeds of discord and temptation. But now his gaze turned toward the entire human race, and he realized that to truly win the war, he had to target the very core of humanity, its free will. The Creator had bestowed upon mortals this precious gift, making them more powerful than any angel, for with free will came the power to choose one's own path. This power, however, was a double-edged sword, and Lucifer sought to corrupt it, to twist it to his own desires. He called upon his fallen angels, now transformed into demons, to descend upon the mortal realm and seduce humanity with promises of power, knowledge, and immortality. These demons were not merely agents of chaos and destruction. They had become teachers and guides on a dark path to damnation. They offered everything the mortals yearned for: freedom from the constraints of heaven, the ability to carve their own destiny without fear of judgment or consequence. No more submission, no more sacrifice, only liberation, the kind that Lucifer himself had once sought and now offered to the human race. For many mortals, the temptation was irresistible. Kings, queens, generals, scholars, and even thieves, all were lured into Lucifer's web. They saw the beauty in his promises and the strength in his rebellion. They saw a world where they could live according to their own desires, free from the restrictions placed upon them by heaven. To them, Lucifer's vision seemed like the ultimate freedom, a freedom that no other force in the universe could offer. But with every soul that Lucifer won, the world around them grew darker. Where once humans had embraced love, compassion, and hope, they now sought power above all else. Where trust had once bound them together, now ambition, greed, and betrayal took its place. Lucifer's influence spread like wildfire, igniting the hearts of mortals with selfishness and division. The world became fractured, a broken mirror of what it had once been. Yet, despite the consequences, humans continued to choose their own fate, turning further and further away from the light of the Creator. Lucifer had achieved what he had set out to do. He had planted the seeds of rebellion in the very soul of humanity. And with each soul that fell, the balance of the universe shifted ever closer to his goal. Chapter 25. The Resurrection of a Fallen One. Lucifer's power grew stronger with each passing day, as the corruption of mortal souls spread throughout the world. His army of demons, Nephilim, and mortals swelled, and his influence over both heaven and earth seemed unstoppable. However, Lucifer's dominance was threatened by a new challenge, a figure from his past, someone whose fall had been even more profound than his own, and whose return would change the course of the war. This being was no ordinary angel, nor a mere messenger of the Creator. Gabriel, the archangel of judgment, had been struck down during the First Great War, when Lucifer's rebellion tore heaven asunder. Gabriel had once been Lucifer's closest ally, a being of unmatched strength and righteousness. His heart had been torn between his loyalty to heaven and Lucifer's vision of freedom, a vision that had ultimately led him to his own fall from grace. His downfall had been long forgotten, buried beneath the rubble of time and the ashes of the war. But in truth, Gabriel's fall had never been complete. Something about him had never fully succumbed to the darkness. Gabriel's return was nothing short of miraculous. He was no longer fully angel, nor entirely fallen. He had been remade, resurrected by the very same chaotic forces that Lucifer had embraced. But unlike Lucifer, Gabriel had not returned with a heart full of vengeance. He sought redemption, not for himself alone, but for the very world that Lucifer had corrupted. Gabriel understood the destruction that Lucifer had unleashed, and he was determined to restore balance, to bring peace where there had been only chaos. Gabriel was no longer the same being who had once stood beside Lucifer. His fall had forged in him a deep understanding of regret, and he had come to see the consequences of his own rebellion. He embodied the possibility of forgiveness, not just for himself, but for those who had followed Lucifer into darkness. He was both the living embodiment of the price of defiance and the hope of reconciliation. His return was a shock to both Lucifer and the Creator. To Lucifer, Gabriel's resurrection was a painful reminder of the cost of rebellion, a mirror reflecting the darkness that had overtaken his own soul. To the Creator, Gabriel's return was a glimmer of hope, a sign that perhaps the war within heaven could still be healed. But for Gabriel himself, his return was not just a message to the realms above and below. It was a test of his own soul and the souls of those he had once fought alongside. Gabriel's return would not only challenge Lucifer's reign, but would also serve as a pivotal turning point in the battle between light and darkness. Gabriel had seen the horrors of the fall, and now, in his rebirth, he would play a crucial role in determining whether redemption was truly possible, or whether the eternal struggle would only continue. Chapter 26. The Hidden Weapon. As Lucifer's influence spread and the battle between heaven and hell intensified, the Creator grew increasingly concerned. The rebellion had escalated far beyond the borders of heaven and earth, with the primordials, the fallen souls, and even mortals themselves becoming deeply entangled in a war that threatened to tear the very fabric of creation apart. The cosmos seemed on the verge of collapse, and the Creator, once the embodiment of peace and order, faced the harsh reality that everything he had created was now at risk. In the face of this growing darkness, however, the Creator held one final weapon, a power so profound, so overwhelming, that it could alter the fate of everything. This weapon was not an object to be wielded, nor a force of nature that could be controlled. It was the very essence of creation itself, the energy that held the universe together. Without this force, existence would cease to be. With it, the Creator could not only restore balance, but could reshape all things, heal the wounds inflicted by Lucifer's rebellion, and cleanse the corruption that had spread through heaven, hell, and earth alike. But this power came at a tremendous cost. To use it, the Creator would be forced to sacrifice something far greater than even Lucifer's ambition, the free will that had been granted to mortals. It was the gift of choice, the ability for beings to choose their own path, that had made creation unique and beautiful. Without it, there would be no rebellion, no defiance, but also no genuine love, no hope, no self-determination. It would mean the creation of a new order, one where all beings were bound by the Creator's will, and freedom of choice would be gone forever. The Creator, torn between the need to restore the balance and the weight of sacrificing free will, knew that this decision would define the future of the universe. The consequences were immense, and he could not move forward without considering the profound implications. With Lucifer now in possession of the Book of Eternity, an artifact capable of challenging even the Creator's power, the time had come for the Creator to face this difficult choice. But the battle loomed ever closer, and as Lucifer rallied his Nephilim and mortal champions, it was only a matter of time before the final confrontation would begin. The Creator's decision, once made, could either save or condemn all of creation. Chapter 27, The Last Stand of the Nephilim. As the final battle between heaven and hell approached, Lucifer's forces had grown immeasurably in both strength and number. The Nephilim, his greatest warriors, towering giants of darkness born from fallen angels, stood ready to face the Creator's legions. These formidable beings had fought alongside Lucifer from the earliest days of the rebellion, each of them once an embodiment of heaven's glorious purpose. Their loyalty to Lucifer had been unwavering, their pride and ambition driving them to forsake their divine origins in pursuit of power. But now, as the ultimate confrontation drew near, even the mighty Nephilim began to feel a sense of uncertainty. These warriors, who had once been radiant in their angelic forms, had fallen from grace, lured by Lucifer's promises of freedom and greatness. Yet, as the war had dragged on and the cost of rebellion became clearer, doubt began to creep into their hearts. They had seen firsthand the devastation their actions had wrought, the destruction of worlds, the fracturing of heaven, the ruin of the divine order that once guided existence. Could they, in good conscience, continue to fight in Lucifer's name? Was the price of their loyalty truly worth the chaos and suffering they had caused? Lucifer, ever the master of manipulation, sought to quash these doubts. He reminded the Nephilim of the glory they had once known, the power they could once again claim, and the freedom that awaited them on the other side of victory. He promised them that they would stand as rulers of a new, unchallenged order, one where they would be the supreme beings of the universe. He urged them to see the war through to its end, to bring about the defeat of the Creator and reshape reality according to their will. But the Nephilim were no longer blind followers of Lucifer's vision. They had tasted the cost of rebellion, seen the death and decay it had brought upon the worlds, and some of them began to question whether they could continue to follow him. These warriors, who had once been united by their shared pride and ambition, now found themselves divided. Some still clung to their loyalty to Lucifer, believing that the rebellion was worth the price. Others, however, began to feel a yearning for redemption, for a chance to undo the wrongs they had committed. As the final battle drew ever closer, the Nephilim faced a choice. Would they fight for Lucifer's cause, or would they turn away, seeking redemption in the final confrontation? Their decision would have far-reaching consequences, not only for their own fates but for the outcome of the war itself. The last stand of the Nephilim would be a pivotal moment in the struggle between light and darkness, a defining moment that could either tip the balance in Lucifer's favor or provide the Creator with the strength he needed to restore order to the universe. Chapter 28, The Great Convergence. The moment of reckoning had finally arrived. Lucifer, having gathered his formidable arsenal, armed with the Book of Eternity, the primordials, and an army that spanned the realms of heaven, hell, and earth, stood on the precipice of victory. His rebellion had long been a force of immense destruction, but now it was poised to reshape creation itself. The Creator, having prepared his hidden weapon, with the Nephilim who had chosen their side and the angels of heaven rallying together, also prepared for the ultimate confrontation. The fate of heaven and hell, and the universe at large, rested on this decisive battle. As the two armies clashed on the cosmic battlefield, the very fabric of reality seemed to tremble. Time and space warped, bending in unnatural ways as the forces of light and darkness collided. The battlefield stretched beyond comprehension, an infinite expanse where laws of nature were irrelevant, and only the will of the combatants mattered. It was here, in this place where the universe itself seemed to unravel, that the ultimate decision would be made. Would Lucifer succeed in his rebellion, tearing down the Creator's plan and remaking existence in his image? Or would the Creator, wielding the forces of order and balance, restore the stability that had been so violently torn asunder? As the battle raged on, the veil between heaven, hell, and the mortal realm grew ever thinner. The souls of humanity, once vulnerable to Lucifer's promises of freedom and power, found themselves caught in the crossfire of this cosmic conflict. Their choices, the very essence of their free will, had now become a decisive factor in the outcome of the war. Were they the key to Lucifer's victory, able to tip the scales in his favor with their defiant embrace of rebellion? Or would they prove to be the last hope for redemption, a force powerful enough to bring the Creator's plan back into focus, restoring peace to the universe once again? The Great Convergence marked the culmination of everything that had transpired, a moment when the lives, choices, and fates of all beings were fused together in one grand conflict. The struggle between light and darkness, order and chaos, would no longer be a distant cosmic battle. It would play out in the hearts and souls of every individual, every creature caught in the clash. Epilogue: the end and the beginning. When the final echoes of the Great Convergence faded, the battle had ended, but the war, in truth, was far from over. The forces that had clashed in such a cataclysmic way had changed the very nature of existence. Some forces had fallen, others had risen, and the universe, its foundations, its very balance, had been forever altered. Lucifer's rebellion may have been temporarily quelled, but the peace that followed was fragile and uncertain. It was as if the threads of creation were held together by mere strands, and the next shift, the next choice, could unravel all. The Creator's hidden weapon, which had been used to restore balance, had come with a heavy cost. The very essence of free will, the gift that had made mortals, and all creation, unique, was now a memory, a distant echo of what had been. The fate of the mortal souls, the fallen angels, and Lucifer himself hung in a delicate balance. The consequences of this cosmic conflict had yet to fully unfold. Redemption, destruction, and renewal now danced in the fragile space between life and death, between the divine and the fallen. Lucifer, though temporarily vanquished, was not gone. His influence still lingered, not just in the realms of heaven and hell, but in the hearts of those who had been swayed by his rebellion. The seeds of his revolution had been planted in the minds of mortals, in the hearts of those who sought power, freedom, or meaning beyond the constraints of divine law. Even in defeat, his legacy persisted, shaping the future in ways both seen and unseen. And for the Creator, while the battle may have been won, the war was far from finished. The balance of creation had been restored, but the lessons of the Great Convergence remained clear. The war between light and darkness, between order and chaos, would continue to unfold in every soul, every heart, and every act of defiance or submission. Each choice made, each battle fought, would echo through the ages. The war was not finished. It had only been paused, awaiting the next cycle of choice. The eternal struggle between the forces of creation and rebellion would rise again, as it always had and always would. The end of this chapter marked only the beginning of another, an endless series of conflicts, choices, and transformations. For in the end, as always, the struggle for the soul of the universe was eternal. And with it, the hope that the next cycle would lead to redemption, balance, and renewal. The end was only the beginning.